Super excited to have everybody here. This is hopefully the first of quite a few more like bigger online group virtual classes, and we wanted to do this one focusing in on the Pico, which I have here because it is Marzocco's newest product. So we just wanted to go over some of the things that we've been having people ask about, but this is kind of more of an intro to the Pico and using it and how we imagine you using it. So starting off, easiest one is the hopper, and this kind of twists on and off very easily. And it has this little locking mechanism. When you do twist it on and off, it locks or unlocks, which is really nice. We recommend just cleaning it as needed. So if you use a very oily coffee, you might notice buildup more than others. But for cleaning it, I would say, these two pieces can be removed. And if like you get buildup in your hopper, which you will notice with like oils, I would take this. We do not recommend putting them through the dishwasher or anything, but you can wash them with like a gentle soap and water, and then let it completely dry before putting it back together. And then I'll turn the Pico to its side so you can see this also. So you'll have, let's see if I lay this down, yeah. So you'll have these burrs in here that you can see. Sometimes you might be able to see like if you have a lot of stuff kind of jammed in there. So you could always use like a little pick cleaning tool if you have something like, I had a little oh yeah. If you have like a little gasket pick, or even like just a skewer that you might put shrimp on or something to put on the barbecue, you can then just kind of clean out if you have gunk in the burrs. People use compressed air or something like that. But that shouldn't really be happening. But if you use very oily coffee, you might run into having a little bit of a oily bit in there. And then next up, we've got the cool piece, these two pieces that come with the grinder, forks for your portafilter, and or this is for the dosing cup. Dosing cup one first, it just snaps in, a little magnet, and that makes it to where it can fit the small dosing cup really perfectly there for grinding out. We also have this dosing cup on the Marzocco site, which we really love using as well. Next up, this portafilter fork holder, again, just magnet, snaps in. Depending on how this is configured, it will fit just easily in here. But if it doesn't, then it has a cool adjustment capability I'll show you. So say these are too high for your portafilter. It has these little knobs on the side, and you twist them opposite of each other. So twisting it one away from you, one towards you, you can then move the forks up and down. They're super nice. So generally you might want them right in the middle, but say for this convertible portafilter, I'm putting it a little lower because say that one was a little tight. All right, and then snap it in. So now, and it's a little low, so I'm gonna bring it back. Bring it up just a little bit. So you can kind of configure this however you want, depending on the portafilter that you use. So there, now it like rests pretty perfectly there. And then also, if you wanted to use a bottomless portafilter, then I would keep it the same. But if you, again, have this convertible one and you want to use it as the bottomless, then you're going to swap these little rubber pieces. So you pull them off and you're going to flip them around and upside down. So it's kind of confusing, but I'll show you. Basically, these little rubber pieces that stick up, if you have the convertible cutout, you want them to be facing in, versus if you have the classic, then you'll turn them around and you want them facing out. So the reason you flip it upside down is so that it actually will have these pieces facing either out or in. So let's face them in. So this is for the bottomless, so I'll show you. So this way it fits right there in that little cutout piece on the portafilter. So useful. But for fun, let's just use the dosing cup because I love it. So we'll just leave it like that for this time. Okay, other things about the grinder. We've got the buttons here, which are pretty awesome. I guess I should also turn it on. And the little on button is to the side here underneath. So you just swap that on and then it'll turn. So we've got 3 buttons. We've got the continuous flow button, and we've also got 2 buttons that can be programmed to whatever you might want them to be. It's a grind by time grinder, so this number is going to be the amount of time that the grinder is going to grind for. There's a little tiny dot at the end of this number, and this kind of trips people up, so I wanted to mention it, which is like you can accidentally set it and not realize that this has happened. This button, if you hold it down for 10 seconds, there'll be a little dot there or it won't. This is like single dose versus using like the hopper dose is what they call it in the manual. But it makes it to where either this is activating the grinding or you have your activation button activating the grinder. So 2 different ways, and it's just for this first button. So for instance, like right now it is set to when I press this, it starts grinding. You can see the counter or the shot timer counting down. And then when I press this, nothing is happening. So otherwise I'll hold this button down for 10 seconds. It feels like a really long time until that button disappears. And there. So now it's disappeared. Now when I press this, it's grinding as, you know, as continual. So when I, just like for any of the other buttons. So when I press it, it grinds. When I let go, it stops grinding. So yeah, if you have questions about that, put it in the chat. But wanted to kind of go over it just to give people an idea that is something that happens with it. And then we also have a little barista light, which is cool on the Pico right here. You can see it. With the Marzocco Home app, you can connect your app to the Pico and you can turn that little barista light on and off. So if you want it to, you know, be off for some reason it's bothering you, you can do that through the app. You can also set your time doses through the app, which is pretty awesome. And so that's something that's new. So if you wanted to be like, oh, this is on 5 and I want it on 6, but I don't feel like pressing this button, you can do it on your phone. Going over the collar, obviously we're going to be talking a lot about this little adjustment ring because this is what you're going to be changing the most. On average, you could probably imagine just making small adjustments to your grinder with this ring about twice a week. I'm going to check my phone real quick to see if we have any questions before diving into actually doing adjustments. First, number 1 question that people are seeming curious about is setting the 0 point on the Pico slash also just recalibrating it. This is something that maybe we'll go into a little bit more at the end, or if you feel like you have something a little bit off on your grinder, we can always do more one-on-one support with you, so definitely reach out. But it is pretty easy to recalibrate it if you feel like your ring is offsetted, or if you maybe got a little bit of a clog when making an adjustment and you took your burr out, this ring comes totally off. And if that happened, then maybe when you put it back on, it needed to be adjusted a little bit. So I'm not gonna actually show that in this class, but we could walk through it with you individually if that did happen to you. And then as far as grinder, grind size settings, then that's gonna be also kind of, there is a little trick on the Pico. If your Pico is calibrated, make sure there's no beans in the hopper. I'm just gonna do this. You definitely don't need to do this at home, but I'm just gonna show you. Basically, if, because espresso is on the finer grind size. So if I'm turning my wheel around towards finer, these numbers are they're arbitrary. So they're not necessarily any certain, like number is what you need to be on. But if I'm moving it to where it feels like nice and tight, I'm like turning it, I'm like, it feels tight. Okay, that's a pretty fine grind setting. From there, it's kind of made to be somewhere between 7 and 15 is like the relative espresso range for the Pico. So another good place to start. This is not where you're going to end up necessarily, but it's kind of a nice place to begin. And so we're going to get into, setting our doses here. But a question I actually get a lot is, what is the most classic basket to use? And if you like drinking kind of more specialty coffee, you're probably drinking coffee that's coming out of a 17-gram basket. So that is one of the most common ones. And so that's what I have in here. And I'll just pop this out. So you just push up on the bottom if you have a bottomless portafilter to pop it out. It's a little hot. Versus if you have a classic portafilter, I'll also show you. To pop it out, you'll use the edge of this basket and kind of wedge that out. Then you can just pull it. So first step is to see what your basket size is and know that is kind of the basis for your recipe of dialing in, which I'm going to use a 17-gram basket for my double shot here. And the Pico is made to be able to grind out about 17 to 18 grams in roughly 9 seconds. So that's kind of a good starting point to know of like, okay, 9 seconds on this grinder is kind of a good medium point to start with for like kind of understanding what I'm going to be setting my grinder to. Have this on continuous and we'll grind out a little bit of coffee to just check where we're at. So I'm going to fill my hopper up. I moved it to 10 and then poured coffee in. So if you're ever making bigger adjustments on your grinder, you want to make sure there's no coffee in those burrs, because that is how you get a little bit of you can get stuck. Because as you're moving those burrs closer together, the coffee can get squished and it'll be like, it's stuck. So it's on 10 and I'm going to just grind a little bit out and look at it. So looking at it, you kind of want it to look like powdered sugar. When you kind of shake it, it sticks together just a little bit, and then that's, yeah, good sign. Also, I'm gonna see like how much am I getting in about 9 seconds, because I should be getting close to 19 grams if my grind size is within the kind of espresso zone. So I will do that, and I'm just gonna hold it for 9 seconds. Okay, a little bit longer than 9 seconds. Let's see. Oh, whoops, I forgot to weigh it out. So just gonna. So tear out my dosing cup, then transfer it in the grinds. So that was 18 grams. So that's pretty good. So that means like, okay, 10, this is gonna be a solid starting point for my grind size. So, and really the only way from here, once you're like, okay, I got about 17 to 18 grams, took about 9 seconds. My grind size was really powdery. Now the only thing to know like about dialing in the next point is you have to start pulling a shot and tasting it. And then I also have the brew by weight scale, which I'm going to use. So the brew by weight scale is just set to a classic 1:2 ratio. So I'm doing 17 to 18 grams in and about 34 grams out. So those things in this setup are set. So I'm not really going to change those until I really start tasting, and then maybe I would say, maybe I would want it a little different. And I'm going to transfer my dose. And then you can use a classic tamper. And if you do, you really just want your coffee tamped as flat as possible. We love at Marzocco Home using just the distribution tool because it makes it perfectly flat. I set it kind of deep. If you have one of these, you can adjust the settings so it can be deeper, it can be shallower, depending on what you're trying to do with it. But you'll just set it right on top and slowly twist it around. And I would twist it around like maybe 4 or 5 times because you really want to give it time to be like evening out that coffee. And then I'll also show you, so you want your coffee to be below this little line. There's a little kind of indent in your basket, the basket that comes with the machine. If you're using a different basket, totally fine, but you want there to be a good amount of space. You need it to be pretty deep in the basket because otherwise it'll be jammed up against the screen and screw in your machine. That will break the puck, cause channeling, cause uneven extraction. So let us see how this espresso shot pulls. Okay, and just gonna start. Great, so it's actually not pulling too bad. This does not always happen when you are grinding out, but we kind of had a few things that were helping us to get it to where our first shot wasn't a complete mess, because that is a very real reality. Sometimes your first shot is just a little crazy, and you've got to kind of adjust it down. But we've got, you know, a good amount of roughly good grind size to start with, good time frame. Now this only took 20 seconds, so it's pretty quick shot. It's kind of like on the quicker side of what you would generally want it to taste like, but it did give me 34 grams, and the brew by weight scale stopped it for me, which is great. So I'm gonna taste it and see what we got. You can see it has a nice crema to it. That's great. You'll have a good crema on your espresso if your grind size is fine enough. So that definitely helps you get a good crema, but also having freshly roasted coffee is how you get that really nice crema. So another funny thing is the crema on top of the shot is like the most bitter part of the shot. So if you just take a giant sip of the crema, it'll be pretty bitter. So we always recommend stirring, or you can pour it into another cup to kind of mix it in. Also, it can be hot. Cool. So this is actually not a bad shot. It's pretty good. But if I was to take a note, taking notes is one of the best ways of kind of developing your palate, and really good espresso exists mostly like in relation to bad espressos. So we say that pretty often here at Marzocco Home is, you know, oh, this shot is good and this shot is bad. And it's like, you kind of don't know until you're tasting them next to each other, or tasting a lot of espresso, which we do a lot. So then, yeah, you develop a palate of like, okay, I taste shot, that just tastes bad because I know what espresso could taste like. But if I had never tasted back-to-back espressos, I wouldn't know. So that's kind of the first thing that we're looking at developing, is that comparison understanding. So for this shot one, I might say actually not bad. It is a little bit it has kind of like an ashy aftertaste to it, and it's a little watery. You know, like I want to know what it would taste like if it was a little more syrupy. So I might jot down a few notes: watery, ashy, just whatever you might think of when you're tasting it. If you just wanted the tiniest little adjustment, then that's like this. It's like, that's it. That was an adjustment, but it was a very, very small adjustment. I also, since we're pretty close, could say that it's safe to program this button to be 9 seconds, so I don't have to worry about doing the continuous and stopping and starting it. So to set it, I'm gonna hold it down, and then the little programming will pop up. So I'm gonna go up to I'm gonna go to 9 seconds and say, okay. And now that is set. And I do believe that 9 seconds is what it naturally comes on because it is a good starting point. The new Mini has this cool feature where it doesn't auto rinse. So you just do a quick back and forth and then you can use that to rinse the portafilter. And then again, so I'm just gonna grind for 9 seconds. And I realize that we're sort of running out of time a little bit. So I'm gonna try to wrap it up. Cool. So then it's also, I was gonna weigh this out just to kind of see or let y'all see. So zeroed, and let's see what we got. So that was 17.5 grams. Cool. So let's see what we get with 17.5. 0.5, it should still be pretty good. So I'm going to use my distribution tool, twist it all the way around. Generally, you're gonna have to make a couple numbers to actually change to get a big difference, but we'll taste this. See, so this is 34 grams out, and this one is actually a little bit, it almost like softer, like there's less flavor because it did pull a little bit quicker in this case. So I would actually go quite a few numbers to make a slower adjustment. Yeah, so I'm gonna say really mellow. And this one pulled 17 seconds versus 20 seconds. Okay, I'm learning about it, developing a palate, seeing what I like, and this is kind of what I would walk through no matter what coffee I was using. People are asking if it is bad to use a full bag of coffee in the hopper and if it will go stale. It won't. And actually, grinders that are created to have a hopper generally work the best when they are used like that. So in my home, I do use fresh coffee a lot. So I'm lucky enough to either live by a cafe where I can go in and get coffee that has been roasted within that week, which is amazing. That's ideal in my opinion. But then, also you can get it shipped to you, and there's a lot of roasters nowadays that are roasting fresh and shipping right away. So there's some cool options there. And as long as your coffee is roasted within that month, there's no reason to do anything to it except just put it in the hopper and drink it. That is prime espresso brewing time. So if your coffee is roasted within that month, you're good. Go for 2 to 3 weeks old. It's perfectly good. And ultimately, people are doing things like putting it in the fridge and or freezer, and I wouldn't really recommend that. One, because it can get wet, and you don't want to be putting wet coffee in your grinder. There's no reason to put wet coffee in the grinder. The Pico is amazing for there's not a lot of static, so you don't get clumping. It's very clean. That's the reason a lot of people are spraying their beans when you see that. But yeah, when you take it out of the freezer or fridge, sometimes that condensation that ends up on the beans, that can mess up the grind. Or just cause it to get dirty. So yeah, fresh, if your coffee is relatively fresh, don't worry about anything. Put the whole bag in. It's great. It's easy. We kind of try to approach dialing in and making coffee as simplistically as possible. So yes, there's a lot of cool little accessories. There's a lot of steps people do to dialing in, but you don't have to do that to brew good coffee. But some people do love single dosing, and there's nothing wrong with single dosing. So if you have especially if you're doing vacuum sealed, it does help keep your coffee a little bit more fresh. That's one thing that's useful. But again, if you're just drinking generally freshly roasted coffee, then it's not really doing enough to add in an extra step unless you want to. Can you use the Pico for pour over or just espresso? Actually, this is also pretty good. Yes, you can. It has a pretty wide range of adjustment capabilities. As you'll notice when we kind of did the getting it to a tight position and then kind of going back to that 7 to 15 range, that's a great starting point for espresso. But then once you're past that, that actually just gets more into pour over range. So yes, you absolutely can do pour over, brewed coffee, Chemex, It has 180 adjustments. So you can imagine as you're twisting the ring around and around, it's just getting coarser and coarser and coarser. Like for those rough 180 adjustments. So going back and forth between espresso and pour overs is a little bit more difficult because, as you can imagine, you have to go all the way back to that adjustment that you had landed on for espresso. So a little bit more complicated, but say you wanted it to just be your pour over grinder, you could, you could get another one for that or something. Adjusting the grind size for temperature or weather changes. And yes, like for instance, like if you're getting very detailed with your coffee, like so, worked in cafes, at certain cafes, like in the afternoon, our grinder was in the sun. That actually does change like what the grind size is needed. So it's something that will come up if you're being very detailed or pulling a lot of shots. And the way I adjust is kind of preemptively. So I also try not to waste that much coffee at home because, you don't have, maybe you're buying one 12-ounce bag or two 12-ounce bags. I would make an adjustment kind of more based off of like, okay, I pulled this shot. Maybe the next shot I would want to be a little bit more syrupy. I might still drink that shot that I just pulled. Okay, one question is, will you have to change the grind size over time as the coffee ages? Yes. It's freshly roasted. You get a beautiful crema. It's pulling great. 3 days later, maybe it's really watery. Maybe you're pulling, you're like, what has happened? It's super watery. You got to adjust it a little finer at that point to keep it flowing within your recipe. And that is straight due to the age of the coffee. Oftentimes there's like the trend with that is fresh coffee actually can be ground kind of a little bit coarser compared to older coffee, which usually needs to be ground a bit finer. As the ages, you're gonna find it up just a little bit. And these are small adjustments. These are like, this is maybe on the Pico, it's one number. You're going from 10 to 9. But yeah, nothing too big. Thank you all for joining, and hopefully this was helpful in your journey of espresso.